Hello everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at the second Cartesian meditation by Edmund Husserl. This one is called The Field of Transcendental Experience Laid Open in Respect to Its Universal Structures. We begin with the transcendental ego. This is the self which has experiences, which is related to experience. It is prior to all knowledge because it is what knows. And the epoche, the transcendental reduction, gives rise to this infinite realm of being of a new kind. This is all of the experiences that the transcendental ego is capable of having. All of these are part of the realm of being which comes from studying the transcendental ego as transcendental ego. Husserl also insists that more than just the ego is given to us in reduction. After you complete your reduction, you suspend your belief in the outside world and everything about it. You are still left with the ego, the self, and the cogitationes, the thoughts which are presented through the ego. And he distinguishes two stages of experience now. There is the realm accessible to transcendental self-experience and the criticism of transcendental experience. The first is this initial stage after reduction, where you look around and you say, okay, now I have my experiences. And then the criticism is the science of this. This is the description of the cogitationes present, the thoughts present, the structures present in transcendental experience itself. So we have the result, which is a science of concrete transcendental subjectivity as given an actual and possible transcendental experience. This is just a science or a body of knowledge which describes truly the structure of your experience, of your possible and actual experiences. The new science could exist even if nothing in the world existed. It is not dependent on the outside world. It's only dependent on the ego and the first-person experiences. So whether or not the world actually exists, all that we need here is that we experience something. The personal ego is not only the initial, but also the only theme of its study. We're not interested in things other than the self. What we're interested in here is actually the study of the self, of the thing that experiences. So this gets called egology or egoology. Other transcendental egos and their existence thus also becomes a theme, because we're not only interested in studying our ego, we're interested in studying egos, or what it is to be an ego, the structures related to being an ego. And this gives us the question of solipsism. Are we the only thing that exists? Does this require that we think that we are the only ego, or that we just can't know about other egos? This is something that Husserl will get to in the fifth meditation. We're currently on number 2, so it'll be a while. But when we get there, he'll be interested in transcendental intersubjectivity. This is what is shared across multiple egos. Solipsism is just an early stage in the meditations, but eventually it will pass into intersubjectivity. So there will be other egos eventually. Husserl distinguishes between two different possible positions. One is that of descriptive psychology, and one is transcendental phenomenology. Descriptive psychology assumes the world and describes the life of man. It is interested in only describing the first-person experience of man. Transcendental phenomenology brackets the whole world and accepts it only as an actuality phenomenon, not as an actual world. It doesn't believe in the world, unlike the descriptive psychologist. The descriptive psychologist is one who is interested in relatively the same subject matter as the phenomenologist, but the descriptive psychologist also actually believes in the world, whereas the phenomenologist brackets their belief in the world and only accepts what is given to them in first-person experience. Consciousness is consciousness of something. It's always aimed at something. This could be under the form of perception or memory or fantasy or retention or any of the other forms. This is just something Husserl notes. Husserl distinguishes two kinds of experience. One is that of the natural attitude, which naturally sees something and posits it as existing, and the other one which pays attention to the experience and withholds assent. So when I see a computer, I naturally just include believing in the computer as part of my seeing. I see the computer. The second attitude says, I am aware of thinking that I see a computer. I am aware of my seeing of the computer. Importantly, we've modified our experience by paying attention to it. It's no longer true that we simply see the computer. That isn't directly part of the thought now. The thought is more like, I have an experience of seeing a computer. This leads us into another distinction. This one is big for Husserl. This is the distinction between noematic and noetic. So when you have a thought, there are two aspects of the thought. There is the object and the one having the thought. So the noematic side of the thought is the content. It's the thing which is being thought about. So when you have a thought of dice, a pair of dice, the die itself is what is being thought about. And then there are the modalities of consciousness which stand out when you are thinking about it, which is maybe this is a pair of dice that you saw 20 minutes ago and now you're remembering them. So the dice are past. So you remember the dice, which are the object of consciousness, as past, which is the modality of the object. Then there's the other side of this, which is the noetic side. These are the modes of the thinker. So when you see the dice, it's there, you perceive it. So on the noematic side, the dice is present, and it is the object of your thought. On the noetic side, the dice is perceived. It is seen right now. So on the noetic side, you have the mode of the thinker, which is perception, and the mode of the object, which is being present. To take another example, like the dice, 20 minutes ago maybe you saw some dice. The dice are past. The object of the thought, the thing that the thought is about, is past. And the mode of perception is recollection. The mode of the cogito is recollection of dice that are past. So when you remember a book, the book is in the past, and the act is an act of recollection. Husserl talks about how all of the higher level experiences that we have are based on fundamental syntheses. What we're interested in are unities of noetic, noematic facts. We're studying syntheses of noetic and noematic facts. And the most fundamental of these is one that he calls identification, which is also called time. This is internal time consciousness. This is the most fundamental form of synthesis. Take a dice. When you experience the dice over a couple moments, you have an innumerable number of different impressions. If you spin the dice around in your hands, you'll see that there are millions of different colors, saturations, etc., that are present in the dice, and yet you still experience the dice as one thing, as a unity. This dice, this identity, is something which is present in your consciousness, and it's something which is capable of being intended. under many different modes. There's the mode of recollection, the mode of expectation, valuation. So you can remember the dice, or you can expect the dice. You can see the dice as something which is valuable. Maybe you just simply perceive the dice in front of you. Maybe it's something that you see as valuable for throwing at someone. There are many different ways to experience the dice. And it's this continuous experience of the unity of the dice in your consciousness, which all of these different modes or relationships to the dice are capable of arising from. You can only remember the dice, you can only expect it, you can only value it if it has this fundamental identity which you have experienced in the past. And this is how we see this temporal flow, this identification, is what is the most fundamental aspect of our consciousness of things. And something which comes along with this is the horizon. The horizon. So when I have a die in my hand and I turn it around, I'm expecting the dice to just turn and look like a dice on all sides. I have a kind of set of expectations about the dice, and if it breaks those expectations too radically, I won't identify it as a dice anymore, or as the same object. For example, if I start turning the dice and it turns into a pig, my brain is going to be like, that's a different object. You're not looking at the same die. That's a different thing, It broke the possibilities. And this goes for anything. If any object breaks your expectation too radically, you experience it as a different identity. So this kind of setting of expectations, the set of possibilities that you implicitly give to an object, where if it breaks these possibilities, then it isn't the same kind of object, or it isn't the same object. Like this setting of possibilities for an object that you experience in part also determines when you experience it as that specific identity. If it changes too radically, then it is just out of your awareness as the same object. Like, I have a microphone in front of me. If someone burnt it to a crisp and melted down the last piece of metal, I wouldn't experience it as a microphone anymore. It would be outside the realm of me experiencing it as the identical microphone that I use. Yeah. So that's the horizon of intentionality. And then finally, we have two things. One is the ego, cogito, and cogitatum. This is the self, the thought, and what is thought about. There's myself, there's my thought of the dice, and there's the dice as the object of the thought as what is thought about. We use cogitatum to explicate, to talk about what's important in the ego and the cogito. We use examples to discover the formal universality, to discover the structures which underlie all possible thoughts. And a variety of examples is useful for that. Every object thought of in some way points to these structures in the action of thinking about them. Just simply by thinking about all these different objects, we learn about the universal structures which relate to them. But yeah, I hope you learned something. As always, I hope this was comprehensible. Have an excellent day.